Yep. Okay, we will resume the meeting as voted on. For the budget, it is 7:50 p.m. Mr. Green, did you have something, sir?
We're still we're still on public works, correct?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
If I could just
Yeah, sure.
I got a little confused earlier. My apologies. So right now we're on general fund. I intend to go through transportation after this, capital after that, sewer after that, etc. So if you have questions about any of those funds, we will get there. Right now I'm still in general fund.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to make a comment about getting a copy of all this. I missed it. If it was sent to us, I must have missed it. Okay, and I apologize for coming in late. We had actually our first day of football practice today, so non-contact football, really interesting. It reminds me like when I was 4 years old or something. I don't know. All right. Anyway, okay. Yeah, I would like a copy of this because I'd like to marinate on this. And I may be shooting you some emails, asking some other questions if you don't mind at later this week. And I know. Can I ask a quick question? We didn't go over overlay yet, did we? Okay, that's fine because I had another fund. Okay, all right. Well, I'll ask that later then. But yeah, and I think all the aldermen probably would want a copy of that as well. Just I got to marinate on that a little bit. But yeah, but thank you. That's all I want to say.
You're going to marinate on it?
Yeah, I'll marinate.
Okay. A little teriyaki.
Okay.
Go ahead, sir.
Well, I'll just continue kind of where we left off. So just kind of restating this. This was our current setup. There's two different org charts here for Public Works. And this is the setup that's in the budget right now. And I kind of color-coded these. Hopefully it's less confusing. It might make it more. But each blue... each box that's blue reports to the Director of Public Works here. Right now, right in there, there's 4. In here, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5. But anyway, I want to stop that conversation unless there's any questions specifically about this. Looks like there's one.
Mr. Walters.
Thank you. My only question is, it appears that you're going to be adding more people to the top of the schedule, managers and so forth.
Yes.
Will this create more positions that are filled below by replacing people who are currently doing those jobs or using part of their time on it? Because we're not increasing the amount of responsibility as to, I look at management as not so much as just handling parts and machines and stuff like that, but mainly also handling people. And that's my question. Are we going to be creating more positions at this by doing this, by freeing people up to work where we're needed them out in the field?
Sure. So I think the best way to answer that, just real quickly, is going back through this. So right now we have a fleet supervisor, and we have 2 mechanics under them. The fleet supervisor works, the fleet altogether works out of their own separate building. They directly report to me, the fleet supervisor does. The building maintenance official works in this facility, upstairs and downstairs, and they report directly to me as well. They will continue to do the jobs that they've been doing. The building maintenance custodial worker, although we are adding one more position with that, that'll help us further extend our custodial services. And the fleet supervisor, they won't be a supervisor anymore technically because there's no more mechanics in the future. So we're going to look at what we call that position. But the workload will not change for that position as it is right now and has been for several months now in this year because we've not had any mechanics in 2020. So I hope that answers your question a little more. We're not adding but one position, I would say, that's doing more hands-on work when that's the custodial position. And what I'm calling right now is the deputy director has 3 people reporting directly to them that they're directly supervising. So I hope that answers your question.
Well, partially, by eliminating the mechanics, which I assume you already have essentially at this point.
We've not.
Okay.
We've really put that on hold because we wanted to continue to evaluate.
Yeah, I was going to say, which is most cost effective for you? Outside service or keeping it inside?
Well, I think right now it's really, in my opinion, watching it over the last 8 months now, it seems to be offsetting. Our budget is what I'm paying attention to. The budget that we've had allocated for outside vendor services, the line item rather, we're not overspending that line item. And so logically, if you have mechanics, right, you would be underspending that quite a bit. Well, we're staying at par as months go by, right? So we're not, to me, it's offsetting each other. We're sending vehicles out, we're getting the vehicle service, we're getting them back in service. And it's all the while, our fleet supervisor right now position is also continuing to work on things that they can do in-house. Mind you, it's the management part of fleet that is what that position, this new position, is really focused on, which is a skill all in it by itself, and time-worthy in my opinion, because fleet management does not go away. We're going to continue to have a fleet. We're going to continue to have issues with our fleet, and we're going to need to develop a real program for our fleet so that we can present it to you in the future.
Okay. Thank you.
Just real quick, and I'm just making sure that we're not confusing titles with what people do. You're talking about doing away completely with people who actually mechanically work on cars?
Well, we have not had mechanics this year, Mayor. And so go ahead.
I was going to speak to that. Since I've been here, which is going on 3 years, that position itself has been very hard to fill. Ultimately, the last time we had a full garage, which was a fleet manager with 2 mechanics, was last year before November, and both of them left for more higher paying jobs. Both were younger guys, did a great job. Our current fleet manager, his training is done very well, but typically it's a stepping stone. They come here, we're paying them around $17 an hour. Majority of the time, they're offering them 20 and up, along with a signing bonus. And you just can't compete in that realm. Part of what I asked Jose to do as he came in, I said, I want you to utilize the skills you've done as a public works director in other facilities, along with as assistant city administrator in other places. Bring those type of qualities and that institutional knowledge that you have, come to me and give me some items in which we can look at. One of the things that we tend to have a lot of turnover in was mechanics. It was a high turnover position and continues to be. Part of the reason this summer with COVID and other items, we had applications out for, the opening for 45 plus days, and very few, if anybody, qualified, and if they did, what they wanted was way more than what we could offer. So those are the things he's kind of looking at as
And my main question was just simply making sure that we weren't talking,
Sure.
Just that we changed the name versus what they actually did. That's all. Just wanted to make sure. So, Bill Van Busker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, obviously, if you choose not to hire mechanics in the future and to send those vehicles out for, to some outside agency, you're not paying benefits for those employees that was doing that. So that kind of offsets some of that cost that you're utilizing for the other vendors. Have you considered the possibility, if you're going to be sending these out to other places for repair and maintenance, the vehicles, have you considered the possibility of, if these places know you're going to utilize them all the time, possibly some kind of discount for their services if the city's going to utilize them a lot. Have you talked to any?
Yeah, so we haven't had those conversations yet because we weren't sure how permanent this situation would be. But I think if this becomes a permanent situation with you all, with our governing body support, then we're in a position to have those conversations with vendors directly. How we got set up with vendors the way it's been this year is our fleet supervisor took a leave of absence, an extended leave of absence, and I asked him to find vendors that could fix our fleet and get it back to us as quickly as possible. He did that. He did a great job. And so we've just kind of been continuing that process throughout the year. But I think to your question is, we'll be in a better position as staff to go to these vendors and say, we want set prices going forward and or a discount.
Does the city own a lot of tools that the mechanics used, or did they provide their own tools, or how'd that work?
My understanding is the city's provided all the necessary tools for our mechanic.
Are those going to still be utilized if,
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some things that we're still going to be doing that's going to require.
There's definitely some things that we're going to still need in terms of tools. And like I stated earlier, our fleet supervisor, he's continuing to do what he can do in-house, fixing mostly it is on PD's fleet, on police fleet. A lot of the wiring components, technology things, he's really good and familiar with those items. So those are things that we can, we don't want our police to be held up, so we tend to get those things in and out in-house. But we'll take a look at the tools and the resources that we have down there to see how much we'll need.
Sure. I guess it's probably well, it sounds like you haven't really made a decision about that, a solid decision relative to hiring mechanics in-house or not, but anyway, I certainly, from my perspective, you know a lot better than I do how you utilize those people and how these outside vendors are, the jobs they're doing for you, and if it's satisfactory, and if and as you said, the cost didn't seem to be more than if you actually had the mechanics, in-house. And it also sounds like you probably, someone asked a question earlier about, well, if you created this other position, management position, would they be utilized 40 hours a week? But I'm sure you could find ways to utilize that individual 40 hours a week, and it sounds like that's what your plans are. So I don't have concerns about that. Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go through transportation fund next, transportation sales tax. So on the second page is where I'll start. I think this is very, very similar setup. The biggest item in here continues to be the 350 Highway and Raytown Road project. As you all know, that was we got that approved through you all, I think, a month ago or so. And as we explained during that approval process, it's going to continue into the next year's budget. And so you all were aware of that. We got that approved, and so the dollar amounts you're seeing related to that project is what is reflected here. In terms of street maintenance, let me just go repairs and maintenance. So line item that ends with 52300, repair and maintenance supplies. We have a number of services we do in-house. street maintenance, traffic maintenance, curb and sidewalk maintenance. And so what you're seeing here is dollar amounts associated with those tasks. And like I said earlier, what I did is I looked at a 3-year average of how much we were spending in-house to that for those things, that work we were doing in-house with our public works staff. And so we're very comfortable with these dollar amounts here. And then the other thing is the salt contingency in that, under that, which is large, but we've been spending that every year the last handful of years. And then below that, repair and maintenance services is where you'll see your contracted street maintenance and your crack seal program, annual pavement marking. I think annual pavement marking this year was budgeted at around $15,000. We added 10 to that. We're actually getting ready to share with everybody what our program is going to be this year because we got some bids back this week. So we upped it 10,000 to do more work on the pavement marking. The crack seal program was budgeted at $10,000 last year. When we looked at our streets, the city has not crack sealed streets in a long time. Crack sealing is very basic, standard street maintenance, and it's really important that we do. So we upped that budget to $150,000, which we think is really a good budget, a good starting point for next year. And then contractor street maintenance is where we'll look at some large patch repairs, identifying some parts of the city that we know are in bad shape. And, you know, they either need a whole complete mill and overlay or they need some pretty good, decent size patch repairs under there. Any questions about transportation?
Mr. Myers?
Jose, just a general question. For the 350 project, I know that we have to disclose the expenditures, and then once it's done, MoDOT sends us our mail-in rebate or whatever it is. And how do we account for that? I guess this may be a question for Russ, but does that go back into general fund, or does it come back into the transportation fund?
That's a good Russ question.
Are you talking about the grant that's out there?
Yes. It's an equity.
No, I'm not. Okay. If you look at the revenue page that's on the front of the transportation tax, there is a grant that's $637,500.
Gotcha, okay,
That's where that money will show up.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Waller?
Yes, so the contracted street maintenance, that's extended large patching areas, like if you have a bad intersection or, okay. How many miles will that do? That $350,000?
It won't do nearly enough. Short answer. So my plan in the next 6 to 8 months is to come to you all and really present to you guys a street maintenance program for the city that goes over how many miles of work we should be doing. I actually know that number. It's 18 and a half miles a year of work we should be doing on street maintenance, on streets. But it doesn't mean we go and mill and overlay 18 and a half miles of street. Mm-hmm. It means we crack seal streets, we patch streets, we do other things to streets. But that's the number, 18 and a half miles. So I can't tell you how many miles it does because I don't know what you mean by how many miles does it do. If you mean mill and overlay, that's not that many miles. If you mean chip seal or UBAS or crack seal, I mean, there's a whole variety of ways we maintenance streets.
Will the crack seal be followed by the milled overlay as you did in some areas?
Generally, if crack sealing is what you do to streets that you're going to chip seal or microsurface.
Will we be following with that?
I'm sorry?
Will we be following with the microsurface?
That's the plan.
Okay.
That's the plan. So we've already begun to look at this. I spent a lot of time on this in the first couple of months of the year. And then COVID happened and he couldn't get back to it. But this is a starting point next year. But and these numbers, as you can see, a lot of our dollars in transportation are going toward a big project. I don't anticipate that in year 2022.
Well,
I think we're going to be in a good position to really lay out a good program for Raytown.
I realize you probably won't do that much as far as removing the top and milling it and putting down new asphalt, but if you do the crack seal and you do the light aggregate seal on top of that, which I've seen in some streets, and it works very well, I was impressed with it. I don't know what the life of that is, but is there any idea how many miles of that will be done along with the crack seal?
Yeah. So again, I can't tell you mileage, but
Okay.
But yeah, I'm familiar
No,
with
that's
that.
fine. The only suggestion I would be is don't let them drive on it until they're done, once it's done.
Well, the other thing too is just because you crack seal something doesn't mean they're going to come right behind it and do some streets will be just strictly crack sealed. There are some that we do that with too, so that'll.
Very true.
Yeah, so, but they do crack seal it before they put the other stuff
Yes,
down too.
I'm aware of that.
Yeah, just wanted to make sure everybody knew it. Anyway,
All right. Any other questions about?
one other thing, how many miles of road do we have in Raytown?
We have 300. We have 163.
That lane miles or?
163 miles.
Okay.
Yeah, something like that. That's lane miles. Yeah, we have 333 lane
I was gonna
miles,
say, that
so we have
sounds- okay.
160-ish
Yeah.
miles.
So that's a lot of catching up as bad as our roads are.
Yeah.
Yep. Appreciate it.
All right.
Appreciate your hard work on that.
Capital sales tax, again, starting on page 2. And Public Works, which is toward the bottom there. So software asset management, I kind of talked about this a little bit earlier. You know, we're getting ready to hopefully come to an agreement, scope and fee with bringing in a asset management software for the city. And it's a work order system, it's a scheduling system, it's a personnel tracking system. It can track dollars amounts. It's a conglomerate of things that are very resourceful for us as managers, for you all as elected officials, for Damon as a city administrator. And last year we had in here budgeted $50,000. One of the things that we've learned throughout this process this year is it's more than $50,000. And so what you see is an increase for that. Payne Saltborn, we weren't able to accomplish this budget year. We probably won't be able to accomplish it, so it's continuing on to the next year. We do have a truck that we identified that needs to be replaced. This is actually a truck that was surplus. I think Alderman Van Busker, if I remember correctly, he asked if we were going to replace this truck in the future. And I said, yeah, it's going to be in the budget, and there it is. Our Stormwater Master Plan, Phase 2. So you all approved Phase 1, and as you all know, they got started last week in the north part of Raytown. This is for Phase 2 to get started. And then 84th and Arlington and 63rd and Woodson. If you look to the right of those, you'll see $250,000 and $231,000. And if you look further to the right, you'll see that they were in the budget the year prior, this year. We've continued to evaluate those, and 63rd and Woodson specifically is a project of a picture I showed you earlier this year. Our evaluation of that is that we cannot do CIPP lining of that pipe. It's in horrible shape, doesn't have any bottom to it. So we need to remove and replace that pipe, which is why you see more dollar amounts associated with those projects. And then we have the 2020 skid steer widener. This is to really help up our game, help with the safety and health of our employees. And I said game, G-A-M-E, with street maintenance, in-house street maintenance. This is an attachment that goes on a skid steer. And basically, it can help lay out asphalt on a patch. Right now, the way we're doing our work is we use two pieces of equipment, or one to tear out the asphalt, one to kind of slop it in there, and our guys are spending a tremendous amount of time raking 360-degree asphalt as it comes from the plant. This attachment is almost like a paver, acts as like a paver, where it kind of lays it into the patch as they drive adjacent to the patch. It's a very neat piece of equipment. Our superintendent went out and got a quote for it, and I think it's a worthy investment for us as a city as we continue to up the amount of work we're doing in street maintenance in-house. And that's Public Works, capital. All right, stormwater. So again, starting on page 2, we still have a couple of items that we had to carry over, the MS4 permit costs and the stormwater phase 2 fees. Repair and maintenance services, we have emergency stormwater repairs. That was $120,000 in years prior. We reduced that down to $50,000. Our goal is to do more, as you'll see down below, capital projects. So we didn't have a capital budget last year, so I reorganized our maintenance and repair services to make a capital budget so that it's a true planned project going into future years. And the stormwater repair and maintenance that you see up here, this $20,000 is in-house repairs, equipment, things like that. So any questions on stormwater?
Mr. Walter?
So you intend to spend $150,000 on capital expenditures this year?
Well, you mean next year?
Next year, I'm sorry, yes.
Yes, next year.
Okay.
Yeah, we intend to spend that, and I'll tell you the way I think is what we want to do this year is identify a project for 2022. And you're probably thinking, well, why not next year? Because what we want to do is design it the year before. Right now, we're not able to design that project. We have stormwater projects we're preparing to bid out for this fall that are still going to be constructed. The two I showed you in the capital budget are for our next year, 2021, that are being designed. And then in 2021, we will design out of this budget a project for 2022. So
the
we have
$150,000 all goes to design work?
It may. I'm not sure. We haven't identified the project yet.
I could show you a lot of projects you don't need a lot of designing on.
I'm sorry.
I know of a lot of projects that don't need much designing.
Yeah, I know. I heard a lot of people
More
say
maintenance and
that.
cleanup than anything else.
Yeah, you're the experts. We'll leave that to you.
Any other questions?
All right.
And sanitary, and for me, for my portion, I'm going to jump over 1, 2, 3, fifth page. That's the expense portion. And a lot of these line items are, we did not change. These are come-overs. We've changed dollar amounts. Probably one of the most noticeable is professional services, engineering services. That was $100,000. We upped it another $100,000 to $200,000. We anticipate, which I'll get to later in this budget, doing some reasonably sized sanitary sewer projects. We have some exciting things that we're working on the sanitary side, the I&I reduction program that you all are very familiar with. That's going to spit out a great I&I project. But we're also doing things on just regular maintenance, failing pipe, leaky manholes that we know, bad manholes that we know of. So we intend to come to you all in the not too very distant future to bring you all some good projects on the sanitary side. And to that end, if you flip over to the next page, I'm going to touch on capital real quickly. So on capital, you'll see sewer maintenance and repair, and then right below that, CDBG project. So sewer maintenance and repair is going to be a project that we're putting together that focuses on exactly that, on a larger scale a larger scale lining project for our sanitary system, manhole replacement or manhole lining. And then the CDBG project, if you're not familiar with CDBG, it's Community Development Block Grant. It's administered through the county, and I've been in contact with them, we've been in contact with them about this program. Raytown is, we want to submit an application to get some CDBG funds. What they ask us in that process is how much we'd be willing to match. And the better the match, the better the opportunity they generally provide you. So we're going to ask for a match. I think what we've shown in here is $200,000, but we're looking to spend that. So again, we're really focused on our sanitary sewer infrastructure in this budget.
Mr. Van Buskirk?
On the community development block grants, I know a lot of times there's a lot of strings tied to these grants. Is that the case with those? What will we have flexibility in doing what we really need to do for our community, or is there going to be a lot of strings attached from other people trying to pull those and tell us what to do?
Yeah, so I would say, Alderman Van Buskirk, that the biggest string attached to that grant is where you can do the work. And we've identified that already. We have a map of where that is. It's basically west of Blue Ridge down to 350 north and west to the limits of the city. So that 20, 25, 30% of the city is within CDBG area.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Ms. Emerson?
Thank you. I did have one question on your phones and pagers.
Yeah.
Why is the operations supervisor more money than you or anybody else?
So the city offers two different types of plans. One is to pay a cell phone bill, get them an extra cell phone, pay their cell phone bill. The other one is to pay them for using their personal cell phone. I'm not sure which one this falls under. I think we actually pay them a portion per month, a dollar amount per month. I think it's $40 per month, which is 40 times 12 is 480. So that's why you see that dollar amount. One other thing is that mobile phone and pagers, the 312, if like for my position, I'm a public works director, half of my position is paid out of sewer fund, half of it is paid out of general fund. So the total amount for me is $624. But you only see 312 of it out of sewer.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Myers?
This might be another Russ question, but when do the sewer bonds mature?
There are a couple of sewer bonds that are left out there. There's the 2007.
Looks like 06, 07, 13.
Yeah. And so those will be maturing at different dates.
Yeah, so one is 2027, I believe, and the other one is 2025. But we can get you the actual dates.
Okay.
Yeah, one was borrowed and then refinanced, and then another one is set to mature as well. So
Okay.
I think last time we looked at them, we were a few years away from those being finalized.
Glad you guys are doing this I'm glad you got this study done and all that. I don't know that people realize just how much of our expense on sewer, sanitary sewer, has to do with the infiltration of rainwater and other things, and that all goes through the same meter. So we end up paying a lot. We're like the third city down continuously on the list of the amount of flow we have, especially for the size of the city we are. So I really appreciate when you first got here and Damon had already started that, and you guys worked together to get that done so we can get it identified and get it fixed. It'll save us a lot of money. So I appreciate that a lot. So. All right, anybody else?
I do have one other
Mr. Walters?
We passed by it earlier, but it had, I noticed a line item for the Rock Island Trail of $20,000. Yes. I thought that was county funded.
Yeah, so that's actually a dollar amount that was in this year's budget. And what that was for is signage, I believe, that we were just wanting to add on it, along the trail for the city.
So the city adds that the county will not be putting the signage, any signage in?
The county will be putting some signage in, but there's also just some of the marketing that we might want to do for our city along with that.
Are you talking, when you say signage, are you talking like something on a pole?
Something that we may,
I'm not
ultimately.
familiar with it. It sounds like a lot of signs.
Some of them, you might utilize them to say, hey, Raytown's this way. So
it's true.
And your businesses are right here.
Yeah. It might be something like that. So we're just trying to keep a placeholder in case that came about. Ultimately, we kept it last year with the hope that this will be completed this year, but we're looking at, I think they're saying maybe next spring. Maybe next spring you'll be here, or this fall.
They're crawling
and
along.
If it does, yeah, it's crawl. But once it does, we're looking at what we can do branding wise and marketing wise to put us in there.
Yeah.
They're going to do their own signing on actually the trail itself, though.
Thank you.
All right, anything else from anybody? Thank you, appreciate it, great. Good presentation, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next is public safety, sales, police and public safety sales tax. Chief Kuehl.
How you doing?
Good evening. Major, Captain, good to see you. What do you
Never
got
leave
for
home
us?
without your wingman.
That's right. Darn straight. What do you got for us?
So just to give you a little bit of framework, I want to outline how I wanted to go through the presentation, which may be a little bit different since I'm new, and I apologize if I leave some things out you want to know, so please feel free to ask, and between the three of us, we'll do the best to answer. I really divided the presentation up into three phases. Phase one is really a review phase. It's a brief overview of last year's approved budget compared comprehensively and comparatively to this year's proposed budget. Phase two is really a focus on some stewardship. I think that for a number of reasons, particularly that I'm new and I've just coming up on a 120-day look at the organization, coupled with the history, I think it's important to exemplify the stewardship that's being utilized to ensure efficiency and effectiveness with the resources that we do have. I guess in a simpler term, for me, I think it's an evaluation of what I call slack. Slack in an organization is where you look at any unnecessary rules and processes that may be slowing you down or may be creating inefficiencies. Slack is not a negative term. Slack is the natural byproduct of an organization that simply operates. Rules, regulations, policies, and practices are put in place for very good reason at a given time. What's important to remember is that times change and needs change, so those assessments have to be ongoing. And if you don't do that, the slack builds up and it becomes kind of heavy at times. So phase two, I think, is important foundationally before we move into phase 3, which is really a proposal or a decision package to ensure that we continue to move forward, that we continue to grow, and that our services that we provide to our stakeholders and continue to improve. So that's how I wanted to do it. Phase 1, with regard to the budget, I as opposed to going over the items line by line, I'll give you a global overview that absent the decision package that I'll talk about in phase 3, and I'd like to do that I'd like to do that in a comprehensive conversation, not bits and pieces. We're looking at really a flat budget for the police department. With the insertion of the decision package, it would result in a 3% increase. And that has to do with what I'm going to call an impact squad. So first, just to divide up, as opposed to going through line by line, what I thought was we would start with the general fund for police and see what questions you had or what areas you were concerned with, considering that absent the decision package, there's some fluctuation, but it's essentially a flat budget without that. Are there any questions on the general fund categories? The second portion of the budget relates to the public safety sales tax fund expenses, and there are some line items in there, and I will note that there is a reference to the impact squad about a third of the way up from the bottom, which I promise I'll cover when we get to phase 3. Does anybody have any questions about the line items that are exist in the public safety sales tax fund expenses? Last but not least is the capital sales tax fund. And obviously our section's kind of right in the middle of the page. Does anybody have any questions on the listed capital expenditures? Okay, that said, I would like to move on to the stewardship phase, where I know this doesn't necessarily relate directly to the budget, but it actually relates directly to the budget, because it's my opinion that before you can ask for any commentary or anybody to weigh in on a decision package that does impact the budget, you have to explain the things that you're doing to ensure that you're utilizing the resources currently allocated efficiently, effectively, transparently, and defensively. So toward that end, I just want to allude to a couple of systems that we have in place and a couple of initiatives that we look at on a regular basis that ensure that we do that. One of the things is that we've engaged in a relationship, and we are in the implementation phase of a software program with Lexipol. Lexipol essentially creates policies that protect. Policies create the foundation for all operations in public safety agencies and local government. Clearly, the foundation upon which we operate has to do with policies. But if you really unpack that just a little bit, and you look at that, it's been my experience that the creation, the maintenance, and the updating of policies that relate to law enforcement, and unfortunately or fortunately because of the environment we're in, you are all much more familiar and much more well-versed in the complexities that are inherent in that system. You can imagine the time, energy, and effort it takes to create policies, to evaluate policies, to assess policies, and to update policies that impact whether or not our stakeholders can come and go, how they come and go, what they're held accountable for, who goes to jail, the discretion we use of force, and a myriad of other things about which you're all probably more familiar than you ever wanted to be. Toward that end, it's been my experience, and I've had a lot of experience with it in this particular case. For 4 years, I was charged with the oversight of the policy creation, updating, delivery, training, implementation, assurance that the policies were reviewed and acknowledged by all the department members for 4 years with Kansas City. That took a cadre of 20 individuals working full-time with a significant amount of training. That just gives you an idea of the time, energy, and effort. And quite frankly, most things are scalable between departments. With regard to policy creation and updating, it isn't really. Whether you have a department of 30, 50, 100, or 2,000, the policies are just as important, They're just as broad, and they're just as deep, and it's critically just as necessary to ensure that they're updated. So in that particular case, that workload exists regardless of the size of the organization, absent which your liability goes through the roof. The beauty of Lexipol is that they are an all-in-one comprehensive system that provides fully developed state-specific policies researched and written by a cadre of subject matter experts, vetted by legal experts who are also subject matter experts in their fields, and they also watch all the court cases that go on and proactively dispense the updates for us to review, evaluate, and put in place. They also have a training component. That's the policy assessment and review system, where the individuals in the organization, even to the point where they have to answer 2 questions about the policy to make sure that they actually read it and understood it. There's also training components involving daily dispensation of emails or newsletters that talk about the policy changes to ensure everybody stays on top of it. These 2 things that I talk about too, just as a precursor, and I'll explain why, they're budget neutral. They don't have an impact on the budget, and I'll explain how that happens. The beauty of this is it's both the document management and policy content solution. And Lexipol is a sole company providing continuously updated, legally vetted, and current policies that are as broad and deep as we need them to be. So that is one area where most departments, I think what they do, unfortunately, is leaders often wind up relying on outdated or inadequate policies, and you can imagine the rabbit hole that creates if you have any issue where you have to defend your training and supervision, because that's the first thing that they'll look at you for is failure to train or failure to supervise, and a lack of appropriate updated policies will allow you to fall down in the rabbit hole of both of those. So we spent a lot of time on that, and we are actually at the implementation phase with regard to that particular practice. The other thing that I want to talk about is a system called Guardian Tracking. I've been familiar with it for about 15 years. It's an incredibly robust and powerful employee performance improvement and tracking solution. It's been my experience that every law enforcement agency has interdepartmental inconsistencies in the way they document, and the way they document employee behavior, and the way the data is recorded, and the consistency with which it's utilized. Not only to hold problematic employees accountable, but to ensure that you create an environment for quality, good employees to rise to their natural best. This doesn't just involve assessing issues that are problematic. It involves a lot of positive reinforcement. It identifies strengths and weaknesses, and it truly sets the individuals up to become the best versions of themselves in the law enforcement agency. It has an early, it's all about early intervention, because I'm a risk management nerd, and so I believe that small corrections made early avoid big problems later on down the road. And if the small corrections don't make the desired effects, then, you know, unfortunately at times this isn't the particular industry for an individual, but we don't want to find out that that's the fact on the back end of a bad incident. And as we all know, the country and the world is fraught with a number of those right now. It also improves employee retention. It includes a robust employee evaluation system, built-in early warning systems, which we all hear about in law enforcement. There's a training component built in, and flexible chain of command feedback loops, so that everyone from the officer to the corporal to the sergeant to the captain to the major to the chief are involved every day in reviewing what goes on inside the department. Both of these systems are designed to mitigate liability so that we manage risk before risk manages us, and that's quite simply what the equation boils down to. We're going to be on one side of that equation or the other, and there's only one side that we want to be on. And these 2 things really work for that. With regard to the budget impact, Lexipol has no budget impact right now, absent a small startup cost where we get our policies synced up with what they have to offer. We identified existing funds for that, and fortunately Midwest Public Risk, MPR, they fully support, endorse, and press this program out to the agencies that they oversee or that they work with. And if we move forward with some of the MPR loss control funds, which we've already discussed with them, the subscription to this service becomes cost neutral for us, which is fantastic. And it's an amazing deliverable. And how do you quantify a return on investment when it's cost neutral? I can tell you, I would have found the money. I would have given up a lot to make sure that this happened. This is one of my mission critical infrastructure pieces that we talked about as a team, and we landed on. Guardian tracking is also budget neutral because we identified implementation funds as well as an ongoing subscription for the existing funds, because this essentially amounts to a robust replacement for an existing system. It's much broader and deeper. My hat's off to Randy to my right here, who spent an incredible amount of time, energy, and effort speaking with them and figuring out that we're going to be able to eventually roll other systems into this. And I think it's going to be a very broad and deep project, and it's going to take a lot of work. But those are two of the systems we're putting in place. One of the other things we do is we continue to explore grant initiatives. But we also have to be careful to make sure that we explore grant initiatives that we can fulfill. So there are some that we could take advantage of in the future, perhaps, that we're not maybe able to currently guarantee that we can meet the criteria, but we absolutely take advantage of everyone that we can. The other thing I want to talk about is you've heard a lot in the media these days about partnerships. I can assure you that long before it was a media event or it was discussion in the mainstream media, that are locally, regionally, statewide, and at the federal level. We engage in partnerships with everyone from the Highway Patrol, Jackson County Drug Task Force, the FBI, the ATF, all of those from not only an investigative standpoint, but from an enforcement standpoint. We have solid partnerships in place, and we collaboratively leverage those partnerships every day for a return on investment in what we provide. And any questions on those? And the last thing I wanted to talk about is the decision package. But before that, I wanted to say, I wanted to thank you all, and I wanted to thank everyone who's listening for the opportunity to sit here. I wake up every day, I drive about 3 minutes to work, and I can't wait to get here. And I have to tell you that in my almost 120 days, the collaboration and the teamwork that I've observed in the basement and up on this floor, it rivals anything I've experienced in my 3.5 decades in this industry. And I don't say that lightly. I don't say much lightly. And I tell you what, it is an incredible team. And the teamwork and the effort and the ability to put personal things aside and the ability to focus on the deliverable to our stakeholders, I would put this place up against just about anybody and expect to win. I just wanted to say that before I went into the last phase. And it wasn't a strategic placement of that. I just felt like this was something that I wanted to make sure I got out there. So with regard to the decision package, it is for what I call an impact squad. And that's personnel costs, training equipment, hiring expense, continuing education, radios, and a vehicle, as well as the addition of 2 officer-level positions. The reason I call it an impact squad is because we currently exist in what I would call a reactive environment, almost exclusively. The International City and County Management Association would mandate that you have 60% of your your resources allocated to patrol. 66% of our resources are allocated to patrol. We're in line for that. The patrol function is always the backbone of an agency. The officers and the corporals and the sergeants, the captain that manages the 911 calls, that handle the on-view incidents, that try to be as proactive as they can, but it's very difficult. I would estimate, and this is you could quantitatively try to analyze this, and I've done so many, many times, and it's very difficult, but I would say that our committed time is in excess of 80%, which leaves them very little time to do much proactively. They're very reactive. We have the entire rest of our law enforcement cadre is assigned to investigations, and they're short-staffed, quite frankly. They wind up investigating, and they prioritize every day. Sometimes they prioritize what they're doing within the day to make sure that they go after the most violent offenders. And you've seen the posts, and you've seen the news releases, and you can see the work that they do. You can see the charges that have been filed by our investigative folks. That doesn't mean that we don't want to press forward on property crimes and lower-level offenses, but we have to continue to prioritize with the violent crime. And regardless of what of the 3 or 4 models that you use to evaluate staffing, we are understaffed. And that is my proposal, to get 2 officers. Let's start there and move forward. And I call them an impact squad because these resources, not the ones we hire, but some tenured internal ones who will be backfilled by the new hires, they will be 100% completely proactively driven. I've fielded 50, 60, 70, 80 individual phone calls from folks who have issues or concerns, and I'm sure you've heard these from your constituents. Everything from traffic complaints, neighborhood and school zones, speeding up and down the street, parking inappropriately, blocking the road, drug activity, issues in parks. It's difficult to do special enforcement on drug houses, difficult to do surveillance without proactive resources, additional community interaction efforts, as well as a special events squad. The beauty of what I call an impact squad is exactly what its name implies. Their agility and their flexibility are built into their job description, and they are placed where they need to have the greatest impact at that time. I can tell you that it isn't a monthly or weekly or daily, but sometime an hourly reassessment about where these resources need to be. Each and every one of you in this room, we have communicated in some way with regard to what you can envision these impact officers to be used for. And what we need to do with these impact officers is we need to track the activity. We need to take complete responsibility, ownership, and exemplify transparency about how we use them, because clearly we'll have more requests for proactive impact officers than we will the ability to fill them. It's our responsibility to put all those asks into the top of the focus funnel and dial it down to the resources we have. So that's a place to start, and what I know intuitively and quantitatively will happen is as we build the business case based on what their performance is and what their deliverables actually are, that will set the foundation for us to continue to move forward and to continue to grow into a place that's closer to where we should be with regard to the type of agency we are, the fact that we're an inner ring suburb, the fact that we have to deal with significant spillover of issues from Kansas City and some other neighboring jurisdictions. A lot of the things that go on in Raytown are done by individuals who don't have Raytown addresses. There's no geofencing anymore. Transportation is easy, people have friends and acquaintances, and we are close. And that is a significant factor in this. So the decision package that I put forth, it does result in a 3% increase to the amount of $190,000 or thereabouts. And I recognize there are priorities, and I recognize there are other issues, and I recognize it isn't my decision necessarily whether or not the monies are allocated for that. But I can assure you that we are exercising extreme stewardship with this amazing team with regard to what we have, and that I am confident in the deliverable that will come about if this decision package is favorably received. So that is a very long-winded and yet a synopsis of months of conversations that have gone on in the basement and up on this level about priorities and our need to make sure that we are responsive to our citizens. So that said, I'll open it up to any questions you might have.
Mims?
Oh, Lord Jesus. I just want to say, Chief, that was an awesome presentation. I want to stand up and applaud you, you know, and I am going to do that because it's time, and I know it's 120 days, and you have searched every area in that department. I'm even looking at your guys sitting here. They look so relaxed. What's going on downstairs? Do I need to come downstairs and raise some ruckus or what? Look at y'all. Y'all look good. I just want to say, what you need? Didn't I just hear you say 2 officers? Because if I had the money, boy, look, you got it. We're going to find something here. Because I'm telling you, this was awesome. You left us speechless.
I appreciate that, and I'll tell you what, it's all about, it is a brotherhood and sisterhood down there, just like it is everywhere. And the most important part of leadership is remembering that it isn't about being in charge, it's about taking care of the people in your charge, whether it's the ones that live inside the offices downstairs with you or whether it's the constituents that are outside. And the power of this presentation and the power of what we're doing and the power of where we're going has to do with the team that works downstairs. You know, the ones that drive out those parking lots in the cars and the ones that are stuck in their offices. Teamwork makes the dream work. And I can tell you that it is an amazing group of people to work with. And I appreciate your comments more than you know.
Mr. Mayor, I look at my colleagues and I know they're saying we did the right thing. We did it.
Mr. Razier.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I do have a few questions. That was a pretty powerful speech, unquestionably, but and we didn't deal with line items. I know that the total budget impacts the job that the police department does, and so I just have a couple questions about. I know I followed the crime increase in Raytown. It's increased everywhere in Kansas City area, but anytime there's an increase in any kind of crime, whether it's in a car or whether it's at the end of a gun, it increases the workload and the length of the workload or how long it takes to resolve it. And again, you said the budget's flat. And so I think it's a fair question to say how you're dealing with the increased workload. I know you said you want 2 more officers, but what changes? I mean, are you making changes in the police department that don't require more money, or are we not dealing with it? That's kind of like what I want to know what's going on.
Sure. Well, I think one of it relates back to the second phase where we have to defend exactly how we're using the resources that we have. And I can tell you that I expect the implementation of these 2 programs that I initiate, that I explained today, I expect that to be about a 90-day implementation process because there's training. These are significant, these are heavy changes. When you talk about an employee evaluation system, a performance management system, and a new way of looking at all of your policies and procedures as well as how they roll out, that's got some weight to it. But what I anticipate are 2 things. One, I anticipate that will result in additional efficiencies, and when we have additional efficiencies, we can reapply that energy somewhere else. Every one of us in this room, we wake up with 86,400 seconds in a day. We don't get 1 second more, we don't get 1 second less. So what we have to do is figure out exactly how we're going to utilize those. More to your point about how we're managing this, it's back to what I mentioned about the fact that we have to reprioritize sometimes on an hourly basis. We have to reprioritize how investigations handle things. We have to reprioritize how call for service are handled because let's look at it this way. If we have 2 major incidents that involve violent crime in Raytown, our resources go to 0. They're labor intensive and our street officers go to 0. And so what happens is our first line supervisors and our second line supervisors, corporals and sergeants, they'll jump in and start running calls. And what happens though is that oversight that's so critical, the sergeant is the most powerful rank on the police department. That is where most subordinate development occurs. It's also where most risk is either incurred or mitigated. They'll jump in and they'll plug those gaps and they'll start running calls for service. But what does that mean? because they're going to go answer a 911 call for service as a priority. But what does that mean? It means that we have lost some oversight on the event that's actually going on because we now have the first line supervisor engaged in a call. Back to the impact squad. I'm not saying that they're not going to be immune from calls for service. Part of their proactivity may be jumping in and filling that gap when we do have an influx and we do have a heavier workload. And those workloads, they come daily, hourly, monthly, weekly, completely unpredictably. So we have to be flexible and agile enough to be able to plug and play wherever that is. But what happens is, quite frankly, with violent crime is it's pretty standard issue what we need to do as far as securing a crime scene, as far as handling it on the street, where we wind up having to catch and deal with the buffer is in investigation. So what happens is if more is inserted in there, then lower level crimes are closed out because the focus has to remain on violent crime. So what we do is we flex our resources to address defensively the most violent crimes that are happening, the things that present the most danger. But I'll tell you, the bottom line is no matter how you want to slice it, there's only so much juice that comes from a lemon. So money, manpower, and material, time, energy, and effort has to be applied to the equation to make any significant changes. So what we do is all we can where we are with what we have, and then we make a business case for what we need.
So another one I was curious about is about a year ago or a little longer than that, I did some research on the number of traffic stops and citations that were given. And in the last 5 years, they gradually went down every year. And people have asked me, do we regulate traffic? Has that changed any since you've taken office?
Well, I can tell you what's changed significantly is what's changed is the environment we operate in right now. And what's changed is our need to adjust appropriately to that with regard to discretion. We are not going to enforce our way out of the current set of issues. And so when we have the fact that we have a very volatile environment, then we have to adjust our discretion. Sometimes it doesn't know. We're absolutely enforcing the traffic laws, but we're also spending more time, energy, effort on the violent crime. We're spending more time, energy, and effort on the calls for service. So there's been no, I don't do quotas and I don't do traffic enforcement to generate revenue. My main focus is public safety. So what we do is we have to occasionally sit down and talk about and discuss at a grander level what our approach is going to be, what our priorities are going to be, how our contacts are going to be. Now, so insert into the equation COVID. Okay, and just play this scenario through for me. An individual leaves for work, worried and concerned because the data is almost impossible to interpret at that level. I look at it every day and it's impossible for me to interpret. So they're on their way to work. They're trying to be compliant with the mask and social distancing. And maybe they're not, maybe this is the 1 or 2 days they get to go to work because they have to work from home. Is it in our best interest? Do we best serve the public by pulling them over for doing 7 miles an hour over the speed limit, requiring them to have an up close and personal contact, requiring them to expose themselves to other individuals when they're locked in their car with their mask on? It's those kind of things that we take into account. So, no, there's no proactive effort not to enforce traffic laws. What there is a proactive effort on taking into account the bigger picture. Because, it's just like crime and fear of crime. They're two different things. I often went to community meetings where people were afraid of what was going on in their neighborhood, but when I showed them the statistics, it wasn't really going on. People are afraid right now. People are worried right now. So we have to factor in the current landscape and the current environment as well as the issues with COVID and try and figure out the best strategies. And that's, I know that's a very grandiose and lofty answer. And I got to tell you, it really boils down to the intuition and the officers, and I've told them to trust their intuition. We are not ever going to sideline public safety. There's a difference between going 7 miles an hour over on your way to work and driving crazy and running people off the road. Those are two completely different things. We would respond to them differently. But we have to take the broader concepts into play when we exercise the discretion. That is, we have to be very careful with.
Mary Jan?
I had constituents call me and ask, when is this going to stop? That they have to file incidences online, you know, say they have tough shed in their backyard and it's been broken into. And they call and report it and they're told, well, just file the report online. A lot of insurance companies do not accept those reports that you file online. And so I've been asked the question, when or if this is going to end, and how can they get around the fact that they need a written report to give to their insurance company, that these things done online, their insurance doesn't accept it.
That's kind of a nuts and bolts question, so I'll answer it. The online reporting thing is really a convenience to callers, and it ultimately ends up in the same police report. What they do is when they fill out that online, we actually have somebody in records pull that and fill out the same report that an officer would file if they came to their house. So there's no difference, and it shouldn't affect their insurance if they want a specific police report.
So they could just come up to the department and ask for a written report.
Well, what I'm saying is when they do it online, it ultimately ends up in that police report, an official police report being made anyway. So then they can just request it in the same way as if an officer came to their house.
Right, so they can just come up to the department and ask for the written report to submit to their insurance company. Okay.
Right. Or have the insurance company do it. We get a lot of that. They just tell the insurance company, give them the number, and the insurance company handles it for them. We fax those things and email it to them all the time.
That's what I was going to suggest. Is what I find is is if they need to offload the heavy lifting to the insurance company, because as soon as they press them on that, the insurance companies often don't volunteer that. But if they make the ask, the insurance companies will do the legwork and make the request for the report. But essentially, when they put it into their investigative case file in the insurance company, it's exactly the same as if an officer stood on their front porch and took it.
Okay, thank you. Now I know what to tell them.
Mr. Walters?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple questions. First of all, on the two programs you described, am I correct in saying that they mainly offer guidance and accountability at the same time? Is that the goal?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Guidance, accountability, and a significant deliverable. I mean, these are actual policies and procedures that are actually implemented, that are put together by subject matter experts, vetted by appropriate legal personnel, and updated by paralegals or the attorneys themselves.
I really appreciate that you're bringing that forward, because I think that, and I won't give any opinions on previous, but I'll just say that I think it's well needed and long overdue. And I also like your comments about if we can take care of some of the small problems, we can keep them from becoming large problems. We recognize the problems as they are developing. The next question is something, do we use reserves in Raytown?
We do. We use them regularly.
Do we use them as regular officers in patrol work, or do we use them as backup, or do we use them for... I'm just wondering, like, for instance, I know, as I was talking to some people up here at City Hall, that at Carnegie Park and, for instance, Coleman Park, there's homeless people living there. We've had that discussion. And would it be possible for reserves to patrol in those parks? Or is this something that's an overburden, or it's not high up on the list?
It's not really a matter of being high on the list. I think as much as anything, it has to do, we utilize our reserves as patrol officers, just like full-time. We just allow them to sync their work schedules with their schedule here. So what it has to do with sometimes is the availability of overtime. And it's another thing, it's another benchmark milestone that we want to look at with the implementation of an impact squad. Because a lot of times dealing with a problem early, quickly, and somewhat intentionally makes it go away before it becomes chronic.
I agree with you.
And so, but there's always opportunities to use the officers if their schedules allow, and if we have, for example, if we have some overtime that we can allocate toward that, and it fits into our, that focus funnel of priorities, that we absolutely use our resources any way we can.
Okay.
They're critical to our operation.
Well, I'm glad to hear, because I had somebody telling me today we only have 3 officers at a given time, any time, and I said I don't think that's exactly true, because first of all, we have reserves, and I don't even know how many there are that are used also in those roles. Just from an impact from the public, traffic is a problem, speeding. I think you're probably well aware of this. I can help you pinpoint certain times of the day, certain places where you could have a field day. And if, I'll be happy to, I'll send you an email on it. As far as making good use of your people on things that are truly, in my opinion, a danger because they're going into neighborhood streets and they're just driving.
We appreciate any intel. You know, the eyes and ears of the community are incredibly valuable to us because we would love to think that we could be everywhere, every place, knowing everything, but we don't quite get that done every day. So appreciate that.
One other question, and Russ, this is for you. Are we within budget with everything we've heard?
Well, on general fund, that is going to be presented at the general, when the general budget is presented.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you that in public safety sales tax, if you look at the numbers, you have the revenues right there. It is roughly about $213,000 in a deficit. And that is this year. There's several reasons for that. Some of the issues there is just interest is not what it has been. It has dropped significantly. We're keeping the revenues the same as far as the sales tax itself. But there, as Chief said, we are adding the impact squad to this budget on public safety sales tax. So that's the reason you're seeing the difference there.
We'll be pulling money from other sources then to make the budget balance. Am I correct?
Coming out of fund balance and public safety sales tax fund.
Okay. Thank you.
Bill Van Buskirk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Chief, for the presentation.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. And you know, effective management and proving your department is accountable, effective, and efficient certainly gives us, or certainly it does me, a desire to provide all the necessary resources that you feel you need to be more effective and more efficient for our community, certainly within the limits of our means.
Sure.
But I appreciate that, and I think as a board, you will find that we will be very supportive.
Thank you. I appreciate those comments.
Jason.
Mr. Green.
Saying howdy a lot today. Anyway, I'm going to be real brief. Just I piggyback off Ms. Mims, Mr. Van Buskirk's comments. Appreciate you all being here tonight, and appreciate the presentation and the education on some of the things that you folks intend on doing that can help make things run more efficient, and the suggestion of the Blitzkrieg flexible group of I don't know, that's the way I interpret it in my head, but anyway. So anyway, I share the sentiments of Alderman Van Buskirk and Alderman Mims. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, Alderman Green. Thank you for your comments. Appreciate your support.
Anyone else? Chief, just let me say to you, the Captain Major, and all your people, I know you guys are working hard, and I know from being there what you're putting up with, especially now. I really appreciate all the hard work you guys do. I see it every day, as well as your people. I realize we can't always jump to all the smaller things because the bigger things take up time and they have to be dealt with first. So being the experts, I will acquiesce to the fact you know what you're doing, and you've made it very clear that you do, and let you handle your job, and we'll be here to support you, at least most of us. I realize you won't be making any requests that you can't prove that you need, and
Sir.
I really appreciate everything all of you guys do.
Thank you.
You guys
Appreciate your support, and we will come out of this stronger than we went into it.
Yeah.
We always do.
Yeah, I appreciate all your
navigate
men and women. They're just the most fantastic people in the world, and the people you've hired since I've left down there have been fantastic, and always got my support.
Thank you all, and thank you all for what you do.
Mr. Ward. Nope. Again? Oh.
Second.
All right. Seconded by Ms. Mims. Let's do it by affirmation. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody against? We are adjourned. 9:15.